Before I start, I'm just interested to know how many people are already Griffith students in the audience? Whoa, the vast majority, that's good. And how many international students? Great, okay, thank you very much. So I can see that my Griffith hard sell that I usually give, I don't really have to reinforce what a fantastic place this university is, because you already know that. So always start off with this information about the university rankings, because universities love to talk about how good they are in worldwide rankings. And Griffith has been rising up these rankings in the last few years. And we are ranked amongst the top 400 universities in the world on 3 major rankings. Now you might say 400, that doesn't sound very good, but you have to remember there are like 10,000 universities in the world, so it actually is very good. And I think the thing I'd highlight to you is that Griffith is only 40 years old, so it hasn't had that long time to build its reputation. And so there is a special ranking for universities under 50, and Griffith is 41st in that top 50 under 50 ranking. What else can I pull out? There's something here about only 2 Southeast Queensland universities listed in the top 500 in this particular academic ranking of world universities ranking. So it sort of tells you you're in the right place. I think Griffith is a very special place because of the way it's been set up. And I actually started my academic career here in 1990. And I chose Griffith as the place I wanted to build my academic career because of its very, very unique structure. So Griffith doesn't have traditional departments, it has interdisciplinary schools. And it always has from the very beginning. A lot of universities in the last 40 years have gone down that track, realizing that if you want to do research on really big problems, you have to take an interdisciplinary approach. So it's really fantastic to know that Griffith really was a pioneer in that space in the way it was set up originally, knowing that interdisciplinary research was the way to go. And you may not know that in its initial establishment, 2 of the original schools, one was environmental sciences, the other was Asian studies, and so Griffith was the first university in Australia to offer environmental sciences as a degree and Asian studies as a degree. So you look at the way the world is now, and it was like predicting it 40 years ago. So I think that's a real strength, and if you look at the areas of strategic investment in the university, you can see that original theme there. So Asian politics, security and development, for example, is one of those areas of strategic investment, and environmental sciences is still there as a major area. So you can read what these areas are. And there's always the question, well, my research isn't covered by one of those areas of strategic investment. Does that mean that I can come here and do a PhD and get a scholarship? The answer is yes, you can. The advantage of working in an area of strategic investment is there are likely to be more resources available to support that general research in that area. But in terms of the size of Griffith University, so we have 40,000 undergraduate students, around 1,800 higher degree research students. It's a comprehensive university, so you will find academic supervisors across the breadth of disciplines as a comprehensive university. But I think that's the key, is that bottom point there. We focus on collaborative, interdisciplinary, socially responsive research outcomes. So in terms of the way it's set up, so I'm the Dean of the Graduate Research School, so I am the person who's responsible for the admission of students. I sign off on the admission of every student into a higher degree research program, and I'm the one who signs off on the final examinations, which is it's a pleasurable experience, and once a week I meet with the examinations officer and sign off on those people who've got to the end of that journey. The Graduate Research School is a small strategic arm, so it's myself, Andrew Queck, my marketing officer, Eliza Matthews, who's at the back, she's the Graduate Education Officer. I have a project officer and a personal assistant, so it's a very small team. And all of the administration around higher degrees research is done by the Higher Degree Research Student Centre. And Adam, who's going to be talking to you after me, he is housed in that student centre. So the people that you initially interact with in terms of applying will be the officers in the HDR Student Centre. And the way Griffith is set up is we have 4 academic groups: arts, education and law, health, business and sciences. And each of those academic groups has a Pro-Vice-Chancellor who's the head of that academic group, and they have a team of deans. And one of those deans is a Dean Research, and the Deans Research are responsible for overseeing all of the higher degree research candidates in a particular group. And so I can't really see at the back, but we've got some deans there. I know Dave Lambert, I can see, is Dean of Griffith Sciences. If you want. Jerry's here. Jerry is Dean of Arts, Education and Law. Graham is Dean of the Business School. So we have is there anyone here from Health? No Dean here from Health, no. Students here from Health, that's great. But yes, so there are the deans of those 3 groups who are here who will be able to talk to you if you've got specific questions. And then where actually the HDR candidates actually are housed, if you like, are within the academic elements or the schools of the university. And we call them elements. It's very confusing because it is possible to actually be enrolled in something other than a school, for instance, a research institute. So element is a sort of generic term that we use. And we have HDR conveners within a school who is responsible for looking after the cohort of high degree research candidates in that particular area. And a lot of schools, because they're very big and have a big cohort, they may have more than one HDR convener. But these are the people who are great sources of potential supervisors for you. So in terms of sort of networking and to find out the sort of research you want to do and who's available to supervise you, HDR conveners are a useful source of information. And it also points out here that if you're currently enrolled in a high degree of some sort and you're interested to know if you can become eligible for scholarship, well, I guess yes, the answer is you can if you have outcomes. So if you published, that gives you something that you can put in an application. We have a very few number of scholarships for continuing students based on outcomes. And so the conveners are useful people for you to talk to. So types of degrees. So a Doctor of Philosophy is traditionally the PhD, and it's 100% research. So it's a doctorate. And also doctorates are the Doctor of Philosophy in Clinical Psychology and the Doctor of Philosophy in Organisational Psychology. And then we have professional doctorates, which are research plus also some coursework. So the professional doctorates, the Doctor of Education, Doctor of Musical Arts and Doctor of Visual Arts. And so all of those are in the Arts, Education and Law group. And then we have Research Masters. And this is an interesting space, the Research Masters, because traditionally was the Master of Philosophy, which is 100% research. This is like the Master of Philosophy is the level down from the PhD. It's equivalent to that. But in the last year or so, we now have additional Masters of Research. So you can see that some of these are showing that they're actually going to start in semester 1, 2015. So we already have the Master of Music Research and the Master of Visual Arts, but from semester 1, 2015, we will have the Master of Arts Research, the Master of Medical Research, and the Master of Education and Professional Studies Research. So they are high degrees in their own right, but they could also be used as a pathway into a doctorate if you so choose to go that way. Okay, so entry requirements, and these are entry requirements into these degree programs. This is not the requirements to be eligible for scholarship. So I'm going to go through these, and then when Adam will talk to you about what you need to be eligible for scholarship. So to get in, we talk about honours degree as the benchmark, and so to be eligible for admission into a doctoral degree, you need to have Honours 2A or better. And it says here, or equivalent, so I need to explain to you, and I will in a minute, what equivalent means. And for entry in a master's, it's Honours 2B or equivalent. So equivalent qualifications, and there are many of these, and I'll go through them with you. A bachelor or master's degree with honours, which includes a research component of at least 40 credit points. So this is the Griffith speak in terms of credit points. If you're coming in from different universities, they have different ways of measuring the amount of research you do. But typically, it's at least one full-time equivalent semester of research. And that 40 credit points can include a research methodology course equivalent to 10 credit points. But this is really the key to knowing whether you're eligible, is whether or not you have that research component or not. And I'll explain to you the different ways that you can get that research component. So Honours 2A equivalent requires having a grade of distinction or better for the research component, and Honours 2B equivalence requires a grade of credit or equivalent for the research component. So the other requirements are, if you're an international student and English is not your first language, then you will need English language proficiency, and if we measure it by IELTS, that's a score of 6.5, no subscore less than 6. And other documentation is listed here. You need to submit a research proposal, so before you actually apply, you need to have found your supervisors and developed a research proposal for the area you want to work in. You have to submit referees reports, and sometimes there's some special conditions, but I don't really need to dwell on those in terms of IP issues and so on. So here is our marvellous chart on how you can get into a high degree research. And I guess the whole point is that we want to make it flexible because we want to maximise opportunities for people. We're not just saying, you must do this, you must have an honours degree, otherwise you can't come in. So there are multiple possible pathways. I do have a pointer on here, I think. Yes, so this is like the traditional way in, and this is certainly used to be the predominant way in. In the Australian system, you do a bachelor's degree with honours, and then you can go straight into a PhD because the honours has that research component. You can also you can get, if you've done a bachelor's degree, you can get research experience by some means, and providing you can provide evidence of that research that you've done, for instance usually by publications, then you can go into a PhD. If you've done a graduate diploma, it wouldn't have given you the research experience, so you need to get the research experience to go into a PhD. And remember, when I'm talking about research experience, it has to be equivalent to that honours degree level. So it has to be equivalent to 40 credit points of research that you've done. The way that I'll explain to you, and these are quite new degrees that we have in the university, these are graduate diploma of research studies, are specifically designed for people who don't have that research component. So once you have the research component, you can either go directly into the PhD, or you can go into a master's, upgrade into a PhD. So I guess that's the real, if you're here and saying, can I get in? This is the sort of first point to look at to see whether you currently have the qualifications or what you need to do to get the qualifications to get into a high degree. And the reason we do that is because it's really research preparation, so that you can start a higher degree and be successful. You need to have that research background. You can't just come in and start from scratch. You need to have done some preliminary research and have the outcomes from doing that. Okay, so how to become eligible, and here are the examples. So for instance, so you've done a bachelor's degree or a master's by coursework, and have some combination of study and work experience but have not completed a research component. So what can you do? Well, you can do an honours project, and usually that's 12 months full-time extension to the degree you have completed, so that's the traditional way in. You can do one of these graduate diploma of research studies, which are now offered in all of the groups in some format. Or if you've done research in some capacity and you're able to demonstrate the outputs from that research, then that can be taken into account. Suppose that you have an honours degree, but you don't have the right score to get into the degree that you want to get into. And I think that's the thing that I'm stressing here, that if you go into a Master of Philosophy or a PhD, the only distinction between those two is the grade that you have for your degree that's required to go into that. It's exactly the same requirement in terms of the 40 credit points of research. So if you don't have the right results for admission, so that's equivalent to Honours 2A to get into a PhD, you might still be eligible for admission if you're able to present evidence of research outputs in the form of publications in refereed journal articles, conference papers, books or chapters, if you're in the creative arts, creative work or performance, or you've generated research income. So all of that would be taken into account. Suppose you've worked in industry but have not completed any formal research. Again, you would work towards generating that necessary research output. It's possible that you could do the graduate diploma of research studies and get the research component in that way. And if you're applying for a professional doctorate, for example, the Doctor of Education, but have not completed the research requirements and you're not eligible for the graduate diploma of research studies, you could complete an end-on honours program, demonstrating research output. But also in these cases, it's possible to put forward a portfolio of work. In fact, you must put forward a portfolio of work and the education background that you have, which is taken into account. So this is for HDR candidates studying without a scholarship and looking for funding, ways to become eligible for a scholarship. We do have occasionally Australian Postgraduate Awards industry, which provide a living allowance scholarship, and these would be made available by a supervisor who would offer them. And the level of requirement for those is Honours 2A and not Honours 1. So they're occasionally available, so that's something to think about. But you would have to work on the project that's offered, so you couldn't just work on what you wanted to do and take up that scholarship. We do have, as I mentioned before, a few scholarships that are offered for continuing students, which are offered alongside the main round. And are dependent on being confirmed and providing evidence of doing well in forms of publications. So these are the graduate diplomas of research studies that I've talked about. So they're sort of being rolled out and they're not offered completely across all groups at this moment in time, but they certainly will be, and probably before the start of semester 2015 they will all be available. In business, there is just one, the Graduate Diploma of Research Studies in Business. In health, there is just one, the Graduate Diploma of Health Research. And then in science, there are two that are available for next year, one in information technology and one in engineering, but there are two others that are currently going through the system, so one in environment and one in science, and hopefully that they will be available also by the beginning of next year. This is the website where you can find out all required information. Just go in the website and it tells you everything you could possibly want to know about the research, the rankings, all of those things, the research infrastructure. It talks about the quality of supervision. We've had an initiative through this year about embedding quality supervision. So we had a fantastic forum that Andrew convened earlier in the year focusing on our award-winning supervisors who'd won the VC's Research Excellence Awards in HDR Supervision. And Andrew convened a forum involving those people, and also there are some videos available on that website with the students or candidates of those supervisors, and it's a sort of question and answer about what you would look for in a good supervisor. So it's quite a useful place to go and look, so that when you are thinking about your supervisor, you know what sort of qualities that you're looking for in those people. And also this website here gives you all information you need to know about high degree research. If there's anything that I've not covered that you want to know, everything about the actual requirements of the degree, during candidature requirements for the thesis and so on, are all on that website. So I think that then goes to question and answer. So I've covered the research degrees and the general entry requirements, pathways and eligibility. And I know that there were questions that have been submitted, and I've had a look through some of those questions. The one that I will answer straight up front, because I know this is what everybody wants to know: what about the impact of the government changes and the ability to charge fees? Because the idea is that there will be some cut back in funding for the research training scheme, and then the ability of universities to charge fees to high degree research students. I mean, all I can say to you at this moment is that has not yet passed through the Senate. So we at the university do not know what is going to happen around that. And then so until we actually know, then we're not in a position to make any decisions about how that might transpire. But I guess it's a watch this space. So having said that, I think I can take questions from the audience, but not about scholarships, please, because Adam will take the questions around scholarships. And if there's generic questions, I would prefer, but if they're very specific, then I can direct to the relevant deans who are in the audience.
If you are trying to get into the program through research, have acknowledgement of your current research, what sort of referee journal articles would you? How many and what sort of journals? A class or B class or C class?
Yes, it's a very hard question to answer because it would depend on the discipline, and I would say that your chances of getting a scholarship would depend on the quality of that work. You would also have to be able to demonstrate that it was you. So if they're multi-authored, you would have to be able to demonstrate what your contribution to that work was that is equivalent to having done a 40 credit point research component of one of those other degrees.
So if you submitted several articles.
And you could tell a story around, this is what I did, and as a result of that, I've achieved the learning outcomes of these other degrees. That would be what was required.
So who'd be able to have that conversation?
Well, you could write it down, and then it would be supported by your referees to say.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Hi. Obviously, for those of us that are students that are doing honours now, the cut-off date is the 6th of October.
Yes.
So what's the process for us, and how do we apply? I've gone on and I've seen that you're supposed to put down in like your degree with your honours, etc. Do we just put in there that it's ongoing at the moment?
Yeah. So there's a lot of people in that position, but generally the honours results are known before we make the final decisions on the scholarships, but we will make them conditional on the award of the degree.
Okay.
Yeah. And usually referees will say on track for first class honours, so yeah. Okay, so if there's no sort of generic questions, I think what we might do is move on to Adam's presentation on the scholarships. Then there might be some questions, and then it's probably easiest because you'll have specific questions. You might want to just talk either to me specifically or to one of the deans in the particular areas. So after Adam's presentation, we can do it that way. Okay.
Thank you. Evening, everybody. Okay. So that's me. My name's Adam Jones, and I'm the Scholarship Officer or Scholarship Coordinator at the High Degree Research Student Centre. So I guess what that means is if you're applying for a scholarship or interested in applying for a scholarship, or if you're a scholarship holder, then me or my team will be the person you'd speak to. We'd be your contact point. Okay. What I'll do is I've got about 12 slides or so to go through, and what I'll be doing is giving you a general kind of oversight and introduction into scholarships at Griffith. So that should answer most of the general and introductory questions, I guess, or I hope. And then at the end, again, just like Sue did, there'll be a period for some questions and hopefully some answers. Before I talk about scholarships per se, though, I'll just make sure, I'm sure most of you guys know this, but in case anyone doesn't. So the situation with tuition fees, and Sue's already spoken about this a little bit. The good news first, I guess. So if you're an Australian citizen or permanent resident or a New Zealand citizen, you are currently covered by the RTS scheme in full for up to 4 years, which means you don't need to worry about tuition fees. International candidates not so lucky, unfortunately. So you are liable for the fees in full for your course of study. So you'll need to look after that. And one way to do that, of course, is by getting a scholarship. Okay, types of scholarships. So there's three main kinds, really, in general terms. There's a living allowance scholarship, which in effect works like a salary, although usually not taxed. And this is paid to you on a fortnightly basis, and is to cover living costs while you undertake your research. The second one, tuition fee scholarship, you won't be surprised to learn, is a scholarship that looks after tuition fees. Obviously only applies for international students. For the length of the scholarship, will also cover overseas health cover in most cases. The third one there is top-up scholarships. And they're exactly what you might imagine they sound like. So these are additional scholarships that would generally run alongside a living allowance scholarship that would just provide a little bit extra financial support while you're undertaking your research. Again, generally paid in fortnightly stipends, although occasionally could be paid as a lump sum also. Okay, we'll just talk about the three most popular, I guess, living allowance scholarships. The first one there is the APA, or the Australian Postgraduate Award. So that's, as I said, a fortnightly paid living allowance scholarship, which is funded by the Commonwealth. So the way those work is that every year the Australian government will make so many APAs available, allocate those to universities across Australia, and then we'll then allocate those to scholarship candidates in our usual ranking and allocation process. Running alongside those is what we call the GUPRAs, or the Griffith University Postgraduate Research Scholarships. And they look like an APA, talk like an APA, walk like an APA. The only difference is that they're funded from Griffith funds rather than government funds. And the third one there is the APA industry, which Sue talked about briefly. Paid at a slightly higher rate, you'll notice. That's the 2014 rate. We don't have the 2015 rate available yet. But as Sue said, they're generally made available through a supervisor, and they're specifically tied to a particular project and field of research. Okay. Tuition fee scholarships, on the other hand, well, the first one there, the IPRAS, or the International Postgraduate Research Scholarship, is essentially the tuition version of the APA. So again, Commonwealth funded, a certain number made available each year, divvied up between universities across Australia, and then allocated through our normal ranking and allocation process. They'd almost always be awarded with an APA as well. The same goes for GWIPRAs, which is the Griffith University funded tuition fee scholarships. Again, mirror the Commonwealth scheme, just funded from Griffith rather than the government. And again, awarded to international students and almost always awarded with a living scholarship as well. Finally, that top-up scholarship. Generally speaking, that will be provided by the school or the group, either from their own budget or funding they've been able to source externally. And that would be offered, as I say, alongside that living allowance scholarship. Occasionally you may end up with the top-up scholarship but not the living allowance, but generally we try and put those things together. So they're the three main ones, and I guess they run for longer periods of time. Throughout your candidature, though, and throughout the academic year, we do offer other scholarships as well. So we've got a list of them there. We've got the Completion Allowance Scholarship. So that's a scholarship, for example, that's given to students who don't currently have a living allowance scholarship, who are getting towards the end of their candidature, getting ready to submit their thesis, and just need a little bit of financial assistance to focus on that. It's a scholarship we offer 4 times a year. The continuing student scholarship scheme, Sue spoke to a little bit. So that's for students who've been here for 12 months already studying for a PhD, but no more than 2 years. And that's just to give students who maybe commenced their studies without a scholarship the opportunity to get that scholarship after they've commenced. The publication scheme, that's a good one we've just launched actually, just had our first round. So that's a scholarship actually designed for people who've already submitted their thesis and are then aiming to publish as a result of that, the research work they've done. So again, it's up to a period of 12 weeks after you've submitted your thesis, just to provide some financial assistance so you can focus on getting those publications out after submission. And the last one I might just speak to is the conference travel grants. So again, 4 times a year we run this scheme, and it's just to give financial assistance to candidates who are looking to attend international conferences overseas. That's where international conferences would be, I suppose. And just a bit of financial assistance to attend those conferences. Okay, so Sue spoke about eligibility for candidature. Eligibility for scholarships is just a little bit higher, which I'm sure you won't be surprised to hear. So whereas candidature admission is second-class honours, first-class honours is what we're looking for scholarships. The exception to that, as Sue said, is the Australian Postgraduate Award for Industry. So those are those scholarships that would generally be made available through your supervisor and tied to a specific project. For those, I guess because they're a little bit stricter, a little bit more leeway, so second-class honours would be acceptable. Again, if you don't quite have it or you're not able to quite demonstrate it, you're able to demonstrate equivalency as part of your application as well. And again, I think Sue's spoken to this already. So some ways you might do that would be refereed journal articles, book chapters, conferences. And again, as Sue said in the answer earlier, you'd need to kind of include that in your application, make it as clear as possible, have your referees speak to it, tell a story, as Sue said, and then that equivalency will be assessed as part of the application process. Okay, so each scholarship that we award does come with its own set of conditions. They're usually about 3 to 4 pages, and you'll need to read and agree to those conditions and accept those conditions formally before you're actually granted an award that you've been offered. There's a number of conditions that come around these. They can vary depending on some of the more bespoke scholarships you get. 2 of the big ones, though, is that generally you'll need to be enrolled full-time to be a scholarship holder, and there are pretty severe restrictions around any employment you can undertake when you hold a scholarship. It's 9 hours currently, Monday to Friday between the hours of 9 and 5, for example. As well as the conditions, though, they do come with some pretty generous entitlements. Again, the main ones there, so 10 days sick leave, as you'd have in any employment, up to 12 weeks maternity leave within the award, recreation leave, which can be agreed with your supervisor, and there's also other financial benefits within the scholarship. So, for example, a thesis allowance. So when you are ready to submit, you can claim costs associated with producing and submitting your thesis. And for international students, there's also a relocation allowance. So if you're relocating yourself and your family, you can actually claim some costs towards that as well. So the way we allocate the scholarships at Griffith is there's 2 scholarship rounds per year, which we refer to inventively as the mid-year round and the end-of-year round. So as somebody said earlier, the current round closes on the 6th of October, so that's applications for the end-of-year round this year. And then they'll be reviewed and outcomes will be going out to candidates in December. I might just speak to the continuing scholarship scheme briefly as well, which Sue mentioned, and I spoke about earlier. Slightly different when it comes to the application. You'll need to get an expression of interests into your convener, and it's 2 weeks earlier than the closing round. So the end-of-year round closes the 6th of October, so the continuing scholarship expressions of interest need to be in 2 weeks earlier than that. The application process is slightly different as well. I don't know if we have anybody in that situation. If we do, perhaps speak to you later. Okay, so as well as those scholarships you can get through Griffith, there's also quite a high number of external scholarships, what we refer to as external scholarships out there. We work with a large number of providers at the moment, actually. This is just a small sample. We could have made this a lot larger, and it's just a random sample. So I know one of the questions we had ahead of tonight's session actually was around scholarships for people who are looking to study autism. Although there's none available at the moment, you'll notice that is actually up there on the list, and it is just coincidental, actually. But we gave out 2 scholarships early this year for people who were researching autism specifically, and that was through autism, CRC. Look, these can come in a variety of ways. I'll show you a website later where we advertise scholarships that are available and may very well be externally funded. They may come to light through your supervisor or your school, and there's also websites that obviously you can keep an eye on to see what's available for your fields of research. But there are, if you're not successful in gaining a scholarship through the annual or mid-year round, I would encourage you to see what's out there because there is a large number of students who've been able to secure external funding. So that's the website there. Maybe just make a note of that address. So some of those scholarships will be on there pretty much all the time, the APA, the GUPRAs, those completion scholarships and publication scholarships I spoke about. But we do also put scholarships that come and go on there on an ad hoc basis. So at the moment, you won't be able to see them on that screenshot, but we've got scholarships for the Australian Rivers Institute. There's a number of health scholarships, actually. Whiplash research, Alzheimer's was one I saw today. So obviously they're on an ad hoc basis. They're not necessarily tied into the end of year round and the mid-year rounds, but I'd encourage you to keep checking it because Andrew and I update it all the time, and occasionally there may be something up there that's specific to your field of research. Outside of Griffith, Jason's a really good website if you're looking for other scholarship opportunities. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that and continue to keep taking a look at that. It's a website that's devoted to scholarships in the research area or postgraduate area. How to apply. Okay, so the first two hopefully are reasonably straightforward. We've spoken a little bit about the eligibility requirements today, so do make sure you're eligible. And more than that, make sure that in your application you're demonstrating that you are eligible to apply for a scholarship. Once you've done that, if you're happy with that, the next step is to find suitable supervision. So it's your responsibility to get that supervision in place ahead of the application. And then it's quite straightforward. So you just go to the Griffith website or the research homepage that Sue showed you earlier, and it's just an online application. Okay. Again, hopefully a lot of this is common sense, but some tips on applying for scholarships. So again, checking you're eligible, making sure the application's complete, providing all the documentation as requested, making sure the referees are there, both referees, and that they're appropriate and that their contact details are up to date, and making sure that the application is well presented. Just like applying for a job, really, they are awarded on a competitive basis. So the more you can do to provide a complete application, to clearly demonstrate the strength of your application, the better chance you're going to have. Okay. So I've tried to cover scholarships kind of in general tonight, but if you do need to go away and get some more information, that first link there is the research scholarships page I showed you earlier. So that's the one that will have all the scholarships that are currently available through Griffith. Second one is the JSON site that I showed you, which has specific information for scholarships, external scholarships, in the postgraduate area. If you don't think that's addressed your question, you can contact Griffith through the Ask Us facility to ask a question that's specific to yourself, or the fourth and final option is the HDR scholarship email address. So that's the address that my team monitor, and if you've got a specific question about scholarships at Griffith, send us an email and we'll get back to you with an answer. Okay. So what we've tried to cover tonight is the scholarships themselves and what they entail, eligibility for those scholarships, very briefly talked at scholarship conditions and some of the benefits around scholarships, touched on that. And we've just talked again about how to apply. So I think that's a pretty good introduction and overview. So what I'd like to do now is open up to you guys for any questions you might have around scholarships. The other thing I should say, sorry, is if it's a particular question to you guys, I am going to be available later and I'm happy to have a short conversation face-to-face.
If the research that you're doing constitutes overseas travel and you have to live in country for a little bit, can you use that top up on top of an APA to do something extra?
Okay, so if you're going to be away from the campus, you do need to be careful with that because for most scholarships to be eligible, you do need to be based on campus. There's what we call remote candidature. And in generally they wouldn't be eligible for scholarships. If you're away for a short period of time, and it was approved study away, for example, then those scholarships would continue to be paid as normal with, I hasten to add, the relevant approvals. And again, the other thing, if you're going to be away for travel for conferences, I just go back to those conference travel grants we have as well, specifically for conferences.
Hi. If you start part-time and then want to switch to full-time, can you apply for a commencing scholarship within the first 12 months?
Yes. What I should say is that if you apply for a scholarship and you get a scholarship post-commencement, any period you've already have, full-time equivalency is deducted from the tenure. That's the only thing to bear in mind there.
Do you apply for it at the same time?
Yes. Yep. So in the first 12 months of candidature, if you want to apply for a scholarship, you're actually considered as a new applicant. Just the only thing to bear in mind is that that full-time equivalency does get removed from your tenure.
I have two questions. The first one is, when is the deadline for the mid-year applications?
I don't think it's actually quite gone out yet, but it'll be early April.
Okay, and the second is, if you want to go through the graduate's Diploma of Research Studies, does the scholarships cover those ones too?
Say that again, sorry?
Graduate Dip of Research Studies, for example, as a pathway to the PhD, does the scholarships cover those programs?
I don't think it does, no. No, it's just for the PhD and or the Masters of Research.
Sorry, I've got a question. You were saying the closing date is the 6th of October. When would a successful candidate be likely to hear responses to their application?
Mid-December.
Okay, great. And the following year, when would if you were successful for a scholarship also, when would that begin?
So again, we're still ironing out those dates for next year, but early to mid-June, I'd imagine. Mid-June.
Andrew, just a quick question for you. I'm not quite sure what the recreational leave is all about. I would have thought that during the academic year you would not want to be away.
I mean, it's a bit like employment, I
Annual
guess.
leave?
Say again, sorry?
Is it like annual leave or something like
It
that?
is. Effectively, it's annual leave.
But wouldn't
yeah.
that be outside of the academic year?
Well, actually, you can take it on a scholarship. You can take it whenever you want, but it's in agreement with your principal supervisor. So it's actually, we wouldn't even need to hear about it. There's no extension to the scholarship. There's no suspension of payment. It's just taking those days in agreement with your principal supervisor.
My question is regarding the scholarship eligibility. When you said that the requirement is Honours 2A, right?
That was only for the APA Industry Award. So for the vast majority of scholarships, it's first-class honours.
Okay, first class honours. Now, for our master's students who are pursuing the master's degree with the research component, how would you translate that requirement in terms of GPA?
Would you mind speaking to that, Sue? Would that be okay?
Yeah, if I can remember this, if you're doing a coursework master's, is it a coursework master's?
No, it's a 1-year coursework and 1 semester of research.
Okay,
component.
so it's a minimum of a 6 for the coursework and a 6 for the research component to be considered eligible for scholarship.
That's distinction, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
for both.
When you've got the 2 referees, do you expect 2 academic referees, or could the person have their work supervisor and an academic referee?
Can't quite catch you, sorry.
Oh. Okay. With the referees, you're asking for 2 referee reports.
Yep.
Would you expect both of them to be academic referees, or would the work supervisor suffice plus an academic referee? What would you expect?
Look, generally speaking, I think 2 academic referees, but it would possibly depend on the circumstance. Hi.
So you said that if you're accepted for a scholarship, you will be notified in December.
Yeah.
At that point, are you then locked into the scholarship, or are you able to change your mind and have someone else get it? Or
Okay, so this is obviously for people who are awarded in the end of year round. So the offers would go out in early to mid-December. And there's 2 intake dates for semester 1 2015. So they're going to be February and April. So if you're able to meet either of those dates, then that scholarship would be held for you. If you needed, for whatever reason, to try and request a deferral beyond that second intake date, that would need to be approved by the Dean GGRS's office. So we need to have some explanation why you weren't able to take up the scholarship offer by that point.
Okay, and if for some reason you were unable to take it at all, is that still okay? It's not a problem? Well, I mean, it's not the best thing to do, but...
So you just want to decline the scholarship?
Yeah, that's a thing that can be done?
Yeah, it can be done, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
You said there's a maximum. Is there a maximum for the scholarships? There's the income, which was less than 9 hours for employed income. So can you apply for more scholarships to increase your income if 30,000 isn't enough?
Yeah, you can. So as a general rule, if you're given one of the kind of the standard living allowance scholarships, so let's say for discussion's sake an APA or a GUPRAS, you're free to go away and try and get a top-up scholarship from your school or group, or apply for external scholarships. But generally speaking, there's a 75% cap. So you can get additional scholarships up to 75% of your main living allowance scholarship. I mean, there's always that caveat of the individual conditions for your scholarship, but in general. Hi.
It's probably a tax-related question, but once you have a scholarship, you might have a revenue stream that doesn't actually require work. You might get royalties or some other kind of form, whatever. How does that impact on the scholarship eligibility?
So it doesn't impact on the scholarship eligibility. As long as you're not taking more than those 9 hours employment, then you're still eligible for the scholarship. In terms of taxation, we always have that caveat that check with the ADO. But in terms of eligibility, it sounds like you'd still be eligible.
The scholarship amount?
No, I haven't come across that. You're either eligible or you're not.
Sorry, I'm hogging the mic. That 9 hours of work, is that inclusive of anything you may do for the university, so lecturing or tutoring?
Yep, any paid employment. Okay. All right, well, thank you very much, everybody.